After 5 years of creating exciting business content with amazing businesses from around the world, Savvy is now creating a new video series entitled Heartbeat of the World. This series will feature experts from around the globe. We will highlight and discuss some of the greatest challenges facing the U.S. and the world. Co-create with us and find out more at bit.ly/SavvyPatron.
Savvy Business Radio and runs in syndication on 8 AM/FM stations nationwide, including iHeartRadio and 6 podcasting platforms. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or to become a guest and find out how we can help you get your message out in a bigger way, call 732-474-7375 or email Christina at savvybusinessradio.com.
Our guest today is Kim Lam, Biomedical CEO at Ultimate Labs in San Diego. Today, Kim joins us to discuss how to create that perfect balance between home and work life. Hi, Kim. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. How are you this morning?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm super excited to have you. We're going to talk about a subject that I don't think we've hit on too much in the past, and that is how to build a good family-work balance. And as most of our listeners are women, they in particular have some issues sometimes with wanting to leave their, family behind and that guilt of trying to make it all work. And we've heard the term superwoman or super mom, and can you have it all? And you're going to share your wonderful story on how you have created that. You are a biomedical CEO of a wonderful company called Ultimate Labs in San Diego, and a mother and also a best-selling author. So before we go on to all of that, just share a little bit about your background, how you came to doing the work you're doing.
Sure. So earlier on in my career, I was an engineering consultant for pharmaceuticals and medical devices, and I moved here to San Diego to work for an operating company, and I found that the things that I needed to get done weren't being supported by the lab services here in San Diego. And it's just such a funny story, Christina. I was complaining so much one day that somebody just was fed up with me and said, well, you do something about it. And that's how the lab started. So it was almost like a dare.
And that is so cool. Actually, that's how a lot of great ideas and businesses come about, is that kind of dare or kind of a need to fulfill a problem in their own lives that has them create their wonderful business. And that's how it happened for you. So that's wonderful. You took that dare and then made it work. How has it been for you creating a wonderful business that's been very successful and being a mom and a best-selling author? How do you make it all work in your life?
Well, I feel that for me personally, and I think it's true for many women, that you are only one person, and you can't be this strict person at home and nice at work or vice versa. And I think there is this misconception that you have to be this hardline boss during the day and then be comforting and caring in the evening. I feel that all those facets of me come out all the time. And I think that makes me feel like I am the same person all the time and a whole person. So things that balance me out are my children and their events and activities that I don't want to miss and I want to be there for, but at the same time, there are very important things at work that need to be taken care of. And prioritizing things become very easy when family is first and the employee is second. So that's how I try to balance things out.
Wow. And I like that you mentioned that you know, that setting up that balance, that it can be really hard at times. But I remember coming home once from the corporate office and my partner Brian said to me, could you turn off your corporate woman speak and be a normal person? Because I was like in office managerial mode. And he's like, okay, turn that off and let's be a real person right now. And I think sometimes it's hard to separate that. I've heard people even who've been in, one works as an ambulance worker, and it's hard to turn that off and come home and be like, okay, I'm going to be mom now or dad, and turn off the work mode. Is that a hard transition for you, or was it a hard transition for you to kind of navigate being the work mode as opposed to mom mode or family mode?
I have to say that it is difficult some days, and I think it's really funny that you say that because I could totally be in a bad mood because my kids were fighting over who gets the last piece of bacon first thing in the morning, but then you have to come in and give a all hands meeting speech to say that, yes, we're going to have a great year this year. So I think it works both ways, and I have a small 10-minute window during my commute to just breathe and do that little transition of getting myself together and just taking the time out to think about things before speaking about things.
And I'm sure that through your work experience and growing your business that you've been able to take some aspects that you've learned in business and apply them to your home life without mixing them. Have you been able to do that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's vice versa, too. A lot of my home life comes into my business life. And there are things that I really aspire and try to instill in my children and my employees. And I've come up with an acronym called BRAVE because we all want to be brave in these areas of our lives. And being brave means being present, ranting and raving about your kids and your employees, aspiring and keeping your dream alive. It's celebrating all those little victories that you have in both areas of your life and endeavoring. I think a lot of people think that it's a magical experience, but it really is patience, perspiration, and persistence every day to keep these two things going all the time.
And I don't know about you, Kim, but I've found that when I've been able to kind of have a nice balance between the two and don't leave them completely separate out of either life, like I can come home and talk about the lessons I've learned with my clients, with my family. At the same time, when I'm with my clients, I can share my personal stories with my dog Henry here, getting into a mess of problems or something. And that, you can allow them both to combine sometimes, and it can be okay to share certain aspects of both lives.
Oh, absolutely, because aren't we human, Christina? I think that our experiences in both areas make up who we are. And I think from my experience as an owner and a manager, that people who are my employees and my coworkers really want to see that human side. They don't really need to be dictated to or directed all the time, but sometimes they just need to know that I'm interested in their lives, they're interested in my life. And I think for the boys, it's really funny. I think they just discovered that I'm a boss like 2 years ago, but the realization that, she's working hard for me and she's working hard for our family, and we all have to work as a unit together to make this all happen.
Yeah, it's so true. And one doesn't, stop the other. It actually makes it greater. And I've heard 6 out of 10 moms really struggle extremely to kind of find that balance. Why do you think it's so hard for a lot of people out there?
I think it's, again, this misconception that you have to be one or the other. I think you can totally be both and more. I am not married currently, but I can see how it would be very difficult to kind of even balance another person in the whole cycle and juggling act, right? But I think that is another piece of who you are, and trying to compartmentalize these things or trying to keep emotions from one side away from the other is just unrealistic, and I think it's painful. And I think if you allow yourself to draw those conclusions from work and home and marry them together and be human about it, and I think that makes you a whole person.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned whole person twice, I believe, and also really just being able to be kind of vulnerable. And I think that's important. What I realized when I first started this business is I started a blog called 101 Mistakes and What I Learned in Business. And they were just that, my mistakes. And some of my very close friends were like, "What are you doing? Take it down immediately. You're going to lose business."
Oh, no, that's awesome.
They're like, "No one's going to want to listen to you or work with you." And actually, it was absolutely different. My clients have the utmost respect for me. Why? Because they can see that I'm not way above them. I am a person. I'm a human being with my own flaws and issues and totally working every day to be better, but just like all of us. And I have my greater strength, my own gifts and talents, just like they do. And so when you're able as a boss, a manager, a owner of a company, or any of the sort, even a mom, when you're able to just tell your children, hey, I'm human, just like you, I'm growing every single day, it makes you more human and makes people able to relate with you better.
I agree with that. And I also agree that, showing off your mistakes and showing the things that you did to rectify those, that gives a chance for other people to learn from you so they don't have to go through the pain and agony, right? So.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting because I remember when I was just ending my time as a manager in corporate world, I remember a big issue happened in my department where things fell apart, and I, as a leader, saw it as my responsibility. So I stepped up and I told the team, this failed and it's my fault and I'm taking full responsibility. We're going to go forward. We're going to do it better next time. And here's what we're going to do. And it was interesting because the bosses above me thought, wow, that was a really not smart move. You're going to lose the respect of your workers. And that's absolutely, like we just said, totally not true, because when you're able, in fact, it takes integrity, responsibility, and honesty to come forward and tell people, hey, I screwed up here, but I'm going to do it better next time.
Oh, absolutely. And I have a similar experience where we're a service industry, so we have many clients that we service. And, every once in a while, we're all human. Science isn't exact all the time either. And there are mistakes that happen, and that just apology to the client just makes them respect you more, want to work with you more, understand what happened, and be part of the solution of the problem as well. So I think this idea of being slightly vulnerable and showing your humanity is more collaborative than most people think it is.
Absolutely. I recall many years ago, I was in a boardroom and we had something go wrong in the department, and I started to make excuses and get defensive. And of course, it ended really poorly that day. And then, skip forward several years later when I'm sitting here before my team and telling them, I made a mistake. I take responsibility for this because as the leader, I need to set forth a certain example and give you the proper tools. That's my fault. We're going to do this better. But the situation when I then went back to the client and said, hey, I take full responsibility. How can I make this better for you? Share with me. Now, instead of the last time where I was getting defensive and whatever, it shut the client down and they wanted to pull out and we had to, try to smooth things out, as opposed to the second time when I took responsibility and said, I'm sorry, how can I make this better for you? Then their attitude was like, oh, wow, okay, great, here's what you can do. And then it was a feeling at the table of mutual respect and how can we fix this?
I agree with that. And I think it's so true for kids and employees. My children, I'm not perfect, and I think I accused my son from hiding something from my other son, and I said, where is it? And he said, oh, I didn't do it. And after looking all over the house for his particular toy, we found it. And, just that apology to my older son, hey, I'm sorry, I accused you of doing this. It just made him feel much better. And he accepted my apology, and it opened up a dialogue of how we could better not lose toys or understand that I'm not responsible for all these things that they have to be responsible for as well. So I think it works both ways, both in the workplace and at home.
Ooh, I really like that you mentioned that, because I think often, and I know I experienced that, I was about 21 years old at my cousin's table, and I was one of the youngest ones at the table along with my mom and a bunch of older women, cousins and aunts and all that. And I started to tell my opinion about something, and my mom said, kids are to be seen, not heard. I'm 21 years old. But I felt instantly like I was 5. I felt diminished. I felt like not important, that I wasn't valued. My opinion didn't matter. And so I think it goes the same with your children as well as your workers or coworkers or whatever it might be, that to show them that, yeah, you do have value, you do matter, and your perspective does matter. Let them come to the table with it, even if it's your 5-year-old, because you think, hey, it's a 5-year-old. I'm the adult here. What could they know that, I don't know? they don't have the
Right.
experience I have. And that's not true. You can learn from your children.
It's true. It's very true. And I've actually found over time as well, when we have those open dialogues, when I actually tell them something like, take your jacket, it's cold outside, or, don't forget to brush your teeth, they listen that much better because they know that since I've listened to them, then perhaps they should listen to me. It's definitely a two-way street. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. My friend of mine has a kid, and when they're about to go out, the child never likes to wear a coat. And it turns out, like, it's funny, but I think all of us experience the world differently. And this child does not get cold. I mean, it can be like 30 degrees outside, and they are not shivering. So my friend's like said last time, put on a coat, I'm cold. And she's like, Mom, you're cold, I'm not. But see, that's an interesting lesson right there, because we assume our perspective or understanding or feeling or of the world is everyone's experience, and it's not so. So even your own child, they'll come in and say, oh, well, you're hungry, eat that because you're going to be hungry. And it's like, well, Mom,
Right.
I'm really not hungry right now.
It is. It's definitely a balance between the responsibility of being a parent and being flexible enough to give them their own independence.
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, that reminds me of my grandma. She used to say to my mom, chill. When they're hungry, they'll eat. They won't starve.
That's right. They won't starve themselves.
Wow. What could you offer the listeners as being your greatest aha moment in business that helped you run your family life a little bit better?
Well, I think my greatest aha moment was understanding that, it's really my family first, and the priority is them. And I'm not going to sacrifice or give up any time or energy that's for them. And honestly, that just makes everything so much easier. I think for women, we think and we have to do all of this multitasking all the time, and, making dinner as well as feeding the dogs, and then going to work all day long and running the meeting and getting the presentation done like 50 times faster than the next person because you just want to get ahead a little bit. But I think once I figured out that I was happy being an engineer and I was happy being a mom, and these are the two things I really want to do, and prioritizing those things, everything else just falls into place. So that was my big aha moment.
Wow. And that's such a powerful lesson. I had a wonderful friend of mine who was a CEO of a big business, and she was proud to be in that position because most of the higher level positions were run by men. So she was one of the few people in this company that was a woman in a higher level position. But what I found that she would do that the men wouldn't do, she would make sacrifices that men wouldn't dream of. I mean, once her child had 104 fever and she felt so distraught, but she felt she could not leave the job or she would quite honestly be out of a job. And I was telling her, this is insane. They're not going to drop you off of one day that your child had 104 fever and you have to run home. They're not going to say, oh, we're sorry we hired you into this position because you had to run home one day. In fact, I would think that it would give the higher level, president, vice president, whatever, even more respect for you that you put your priorities first, that something like this, that is that important that you did go and deal with it and then come back and do this when you can concentrate. Because I'm pretty sure you weren't a really awesome employee at that point.
I know. And those are tough situations and tough decisions, and I don't diminish it at all. It's heart-wrenching.
It is.
But knowing that your child comes first, in my industry, we're all about health of people. Everything we do here is a life that we're saving. So everything is extremely important, but you are ultimately responsible for those children. So they have to come first. They do.
Yeah, yeah. And here's the thing. I mean, years later, she got dropped from that whole company. They had a bad turn of finances and had to fire most of the staff. And she took it very personally. And I said, and then she remembered this incident and was like beating herself up because us women like to do that. We get guilty and shameful and like to beat ourselves up. And I said to her, listen, we can only do our best. And day to day, you had this fear inside of you that you would not be living up to your full potential as a CEO if you went home. And that's just what it is. It is what it is. Move on, do better, and learn from your mistakes. Like I did in my 101 mistakes and what I learned in business. We make mistakes. It's just part of being human.
Oh, and I totally agree with that. And I absolutely agree with the experience too, because as you know, nobody can tell you how hard it's going to be until you actually do it. And both with children and a business. And I feel like sometimes my employees are like my children too. You want to take care of these people, but no one you can't tell anyone how hard it's going to be until they go through it. So,
yeah. It's everyone's own personal. Yeah, it's everyone's own personal experience on a day-to-day basis. And for you, taking from it, what did I learn today? What can I do to be better? And as my mentor always said, okay, now what were your successes as well? Because that's one thing as women we don't pay attention to. Men are very success-oriented and very competition-oriented. So they want to look at their successes. And often they measure their success with money in the bank account. But for women, we could do that as well. We could say, okay, what did work today? Where were our greatest successes?
And I love that you talk about that, because I think there is, unfortunately, some little shaming thing that we have in us that says, oh, you can never be successful, or you can never be successful as or the same way. And I think women are successful all the time. It's just not in the same way that men put their metrics on their success rate is. Yeah.
It's true. I think it's something maybe it's kind of conditioned in our society, or we're brought up with, because I was taking dance for many years, and I said after I did this piece of the choreographed thing, I said to my teacher, okay, so tell me everything I did wrong. He's like, okay, how about we look at what you did right? And so it's just that change of perspective, to whether it be with your children or at work or your hobbies, what went awesome today, and also bringing that point of gratitude, which also I think leads, when you pay attention to the successes and the good things that happen in your life, also brings you to a state of mind of gratitude.
But I also think that knowing the things that you do wrong, or examining your mistakes and learning from them, that pushes you to do better. I think it's motivational as well. So I think I agree with you that celebrating successes, and I'm all about that, like small or large, whatever we can get, we should just do it. And learning from the mistakes is as important as well. So I agree.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's a good point. Well, we were talking a lot about how we guilt ourselves and look at the wrong, but it's important to look at both and be honest about both, to realize that it's okay to put that out there, as we said earlier, with your employees, your kids, and fess up and say, hey, I didn't get you, Sammy. I apologize for thinking that you hid your toys and didn't know where they were.
Yes.
Mommy will try better next time.
So true. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, also, it gives your kids a sense of value and that I matter. And that will carry on into their teenagehood and adulthood, that I am someone of value, but also I take responsibility for my own actions.
Yes, and that, I think, is a big topic now with millennials, about accountability and, kind of privilege and expectations. And I'm trying very hard to instill in my children some of those core values of being kind to other people as well as themselves, and try to be giving and caring and understanding and taking the time out, which I find that a lot of children don't do with all these, scheduled activities and mommy and me things, and they need to form their own social relationships and talk to people, and not gaming all the time and just sitting at home. And I think that pushing them in that direction hopefully will make them good men when they grow up and have healthy relationships with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the tech age has been fabulous, but I think there's certain aspects of it that can become unbalanced in your life if you let it, and for kids and adults as well. I mean, I've seen adults can't put down their darn cell phone. Put down the cell phone. But also what I liked you mentioned is that you mentioned responsibility, and I've heard a lot of people talking smack about millennials, but really I'm thinking to myself, hey, if you think millennials have no respect or this entitlement thing, who grew them up? we did.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So, I mean, I think right now I'm working with a client that most of the people they hire are millennials, and they are brilliant. But yeah, I mean, I think what I've noticed about a lot of millennials is they have this disconnectedness with really communicating with other human beings, and that's based on growing up with machines and connecting more with the machines than with people, and that's a learnable skill.
I agree. And I think that these things that we talked to about before, things like being vulnerable, telling your story, taking the time to listen to other people's stories, that's the connection that they're missing. And if you just give them the time and the energy, and not to say that corporate should take over parental responsibilities, but it's in line that if we treat each other well and we treat each other with respect, I think we can all work collaboratively together to reach a goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we head on out here and end our interview together, I don't want us to leave without everyone finding out more about you, getting your awesome books, and maybe working with ultimatelabsinc.com. Share a little bit about all of that, how they can get your books and all of that.
Oh, great. Yeah. So our website is www.ultimatelabsinc.com. My book, Inoculate Your Biotech, it's chock full of inspirational stories on how companies brought their products from R&D to the market. You can get that on Amazon.com. And I'm available on LinkedIn as well under Kim Lim.
Wow. I love that title, by the way. I want to thank you again, Kim. This has been truly inspirational. I want to thank you for coming to share your great wisdom today on Savvy Business Radio.
Well, thank you for having me.
After 5 years of creating exciting business content with amazing businesses from around the world, Savvy is now creating a new video series entitled Heartbeat of the World. This series will feature experts from around the globe. We will highlight and discuss some of the greatest challenges facing the U.S. and the world. Co-create with us and find out more at bit.ly/savvypatron. The Smarter App Company private labels mobile apps, helping businesses leverage content in order to create income and referral generating systems. Let the Smarter App Company create a unique app for your business today. Contact thesmarterapp.com or call 503-528-4973.